So, Liam, £500 million. That sounds like an awful lot of money. Is this the right thing for the government to be doing, to be giving this sort of going back to the 1970s subsidy kind of approach?
There's a lot of economics news around today, Phil and Esther, as there often is on a Monday, so we're going to do a bit of a mash-up. Consumer confidence first. The research firm GfK, they say that the UK Consumer Confidence Index has gone up from -30 to -27. So it's still not great, but that is the best reading since before the war in Ukraine, believe it or not. Back at the time of Liz Truss's mini budget, you'll remember that. See, the horror goes across Esther's face. That GfK reading was -49. So consumers are getting a bit more wind in their sails. They feel inflation's going to come down soon. Maybe interest rates will soon peak. And employment in most parts of the country still remains strong. And on that, the British government has offered Jaguar Land Rover, a British marque, of course, but ultimately owned by the Indian conglomerate Tata. It's offered them a £500 million package to persuade them to build a gigafactory for electric batteries in the UK rather than Spain. It's a combination of cash, cheaper energy, it's upgrades to the site where this gigafactory would be, near Bridgewater in Somerset, close to Hinkley Point, actually, where I was reporting from just a couple of weeks ago. And there's another sweetheart deal to Tata on the side, another £300 million to upgrade Tata's steelworks in Port Talbot. So the British government is clearly getting the chequebook out in order to try and keep Tata investing in the UK.
Well, but I want to know, if people see, car manufacturers see this going to Jaguar, won't they all have the hand up? Well, what about me? What about me? And we have various car manufacturers in the UK. Surely this can't end happily.
Well, this has been going on since we've been on the planet, all three of us. I mean, car makers, they routinely hold guns to the heads of governments of all persuasions. It's been going on for ages. It's maybe a bit more prominent now, as it was in the 70s, as Phil said, because the global climate is a bit more tricky.
But when they've done support before, it's been as a generic, has it? You know, I know they've done other deals with Nissan and what, I get that. But this one now, surely all the hands will go out looking for cash. Absolutely,
because we're in the middle of this massive transition towards electric vehicles, and you can only really make electric vehicles in countries where they make the batteries, because the batteries are so heavy and so uneconomic to transport unless you're making them right next to the car making. That's why there's been so much speculation about whether or not this gigafactory will happen up in Blythe, north of Newcastle, with British Volt and so on. And also there's concern about the government's commitment to electric vehicles. Have a look at these numbers brought out by RAC today about the number of electric vehicle charging points across the UK.
Yeah.
Now, there's a target...
No good if you haven't got a
There's a target to have 6 chargers per service station. That's by the end of the year. And RAC say 77% of service stations are on course to actually miss this target now. Across all UK service stations, say RAC, there are charging points for, get this, less than 700 cars. And guess how many battery EVs there are in the UK? 760,000. And that's why so many people who are thinking about buying cars, they're buying, at best, they're buying hybrids, which still have petrol and diesel engines, and you sort of charge a battery, some that you plug in, some you don't. But pure electric vehicles that you plug in, people aren't going for them because of this range anxiety.
I suppose the obvious thing that flows from that, Liam, is surely the government's going to have to stop this ban on new petrol and diesel cars by 2030, because surely the country's never going to be in a position to deal with that ban.
I've been predicting that for a long time. The EU governments, they've already pushed it back to 2035. I think the 2030 ban will definitely not be there, which is why, again, a lot of investors are thinking, do we really want to invest in these gigafactories if EV, ultimately, electric vehicles, aren't going to be the way to go? But in this sort of grand industrial policy, there's another big aspect too, geopolitically, and that's semiconductors. And semiconductors are in everything from cars to washing machines to dishwashers, all kinds of manufacturing. During the COVID pandemic, the global semiconductor supply chain collapsed, and now there's a lot of calls for governments to invest in the semiconductor industry, and the UK government is investing too. And today they unveiled their long-awaited, we've been waiting for 2 years for the strategy. And here it is. Today the government committed £1 billion over 10 years to the UK's semiconductor industry. Compare that to the US. They've committed £42 billion, and the EU has committed 37 billion. And that's why a lot of people are saying this plan is unambitious. And it's geopolitically very, very important. Why? Because Taiwan, off the coast of China, accounts for 60% of global semiconductor production still. And we all know the fears about China becoming increasingly dominant in Taiwan. It's not something we want to see, but it could well happen. So huge calls on the government to be actively investing in car making, in semiconductor manufacturing. It's hard ideologically, as you two will agree, for a Tory government to do.